Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're watching AMTV Alternative Media Television. Very excited to have Aaron of StormCloudsGathering with us on this beautiful Arizona sunny day, August 13th, 2013. Many of you are familiar with StormCloudsGathering. If you're not, make sure to subscribe to his YouTube channel. Again, that's StormCloudsGathering. You can also find him at StormCloudsGathering.com. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, really excited to have you here. You've had two what I would call groundbreaking videos that I wanted to dig in today. One you recently released titled The Next Terrorist Attack, What the Mainstream Media Isn't Telling You. And also a fantastic video that I highly recommend if our audience hasn't already seen it, Revolution, an Instruction Manual. And the video that you just released on the next terrorist attack leads in to Revolution, an Instruction Manual. Now you go through example after example how the American people and the people of the world are continually lied to throughout history. Specific examples: Gulf of Tonkin, also known as the USS Maddox incident. That was a false flag terror attack, declassified. That marked the United States' entrance into Vietnam. We had Operation Northwoods, Cold War false flag terror attack, terror operation. The intent was to, again, help gravitate the American people and usher in a war against Cuba. They were talking about staged terror attacks in Washington, D.C., potentially blowing up and bombing a civilian airliner as a reason for war. You speak to Osama bin Laden on his overt, blatant, obvious, and declassified connections with the CIA. This is all admitted. And, you know, the question is, why aren't people waking up in droves to the truth? You know, not only did we have the shock and awe effect of 2008, which I really do think shook a lot of Americans to the core. And we always talk about, you know, it takes that 10% or more of Americans, of the civilian population, people around the world, to truly wake up, to have an impact, to change things for the better. Now we've had the NSA whistleblower, Edward Snowden leaks, that has cemented the fact that we are being wiretapped, that we are being monitored by the NSA, that our civil liberties are being trounced by the federal government, that our Constitution is being raped. Yet still, the majority of Americans don't seem to be transitioning into the light, into what I would call the knowledge sphere. And I really want to pick your brain on this and also talk about some viable solutions and some action steps that people can take in this in this information age where everything's at our fingertips and you just can't deny the facts anymore. What's your take? Are the American people, are they dumb? Are they uneducated? Do they not want to believe the truth? What's your take on that?
It's conditioning. People were raised, for generations, and this is something that goes way back. I mean, the education system since World War I has been gradually transformed into a brainwashing system, and that's, there's a lot of background there. But if anybody wants to look up the interviews with Christopher Dodd regarding his, well, actually, I don't want to go too much into that one because that's that particular thing. I don't have all the dates and facts right on the tip of my tongue. But if you look into it, you'll find that there's documented evidence from credible mainstream sources that there's been a concerted effort to transform the way the American people think about themselves and the way that they think about their relationship to the world. And one of the big people who really had a huge impact on that was Edward Bernays. Now, Edward Bernays is generally referred to as the father of public relations, and public relations is a sugar-coated term for propagandist. It's a way of deceiving the public in a way that serves the interest of a particular set of people, and it's offered as a service nowadays. So when you want to convince the public of something, You go hire a public relations firm. It's a huge industry. It's like $3 billion a year. I don't even know the exact numbers, but it's a huge industry. And politicians routinely go to public relations experts before they address the public in any way, shape, or form. Edward Bernays was the founder of that. And if you read his books, he goes very in detail as to how to influence the group mind by recognizing the subgroups that individuals are part of. And he got this information from a number of sources. He kind of synthesized a whole bunch of different writers on crowd psychology, including Gustave Le Bon. Le Bon was really the father of what I would call crowd psychology. But he's not generally recognized as such. He's not talked about. But he was one of the most studied by men like Hitler, Mussolini, Goebbels, Sigmund Freud. And then Sigmund Freud was studied by his nephew, Edward Bernays. And then after that period, once Bernays took all that information and synthesized it, it became the standard way of influencing crowds. And to this day, that's how they influence us. They study our psychology. They study what makes us tick underneath where we don't even know it. The average person isn't even aware of what drives them. And they work on those elements. And over generations.
So this is, and I'll let you continue. So this is indoctrination, and this is conditioning. So, can the people necessarily be blamed, for the conditioning? Much of this is occurring at an unconscious level from the very beginning that they're born. I'll look at friends, honestly, with new kids, and they're bouncing all over the walls, and the only thing that will make them stand still is the Disney Channel. And then they'll walk, and all of a sudden they just start staring with these big, impressionable eyes, watching the TV, and I'm watching them going, my God, this is the only thing that keeps, a child who has all this energy and keeps their attention focused on something. We pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America. We're indoctrinated at such an early age. How do we change that in a society that is totally and completely built around that paradigm of controlling the masses and, of group psychology in general?
Well, as bad as it sounds, the only way you can reverse it is to actually study it and learn it and use it and then teach it to the people that you're using it on. And that's what the Revolution Instruction Manual was. It is, in fact, all of my work is, in fact, at this point, an application of crowd psychology. But at the same time, I'm trying to teach people crowd psychology. So, because my belief is that because people are so conditioned at this point, just using pure logic doesn't work. It just doesn't. I mean, we could wish that it works. We could, say that it would be much more moral if it worked and all these things. But in the end, what we're dealing with is a situation where if we don't succeed, we're going to face grave consequences. And the people are just not going to respond to just pure logic at this point. They have to be addressed using this way of addressing them that they've become accustomed to. So we have to use this to reach them, and then at the same time, educate them, teach them what these methods are, how they work, and then set them loose to do the same thing. Because my thought is the more that the people are taught about these methods and start using them, because right now it's only the evil people, the people you absolutely do not want to have this information, who are using it. It's like a weapon. I view it like, you have a shotgun. It has no moral value whatsoever. It's not moral or immoral. It's the morality of its actions are only related to the person who's behind the trigger. And the same thing goes with crowd psychology. When you're dealing with crowds, and you have a herd of people who are heading for a cliff, you can sit there and say, well, I just want to deal with people as individuals, fine. But you're not going to stop that crowd from going off the cliff. If you want to stop that crowd from going off the cliff, that crowd that's taking you off the cliff with them, then you have to learn how do crowds respond.
Absolutely. And that very much creates, multiplier effect. And I very much believe in education, and that, of course, empowers people, and that empowers movements. A little bit of a problem, though, that I see is a catalyst. Now, none of us can predict necessarily what comes next. We can't predict the flashpoint, the day or time it's going to happen. Anybody that says that they can do that, is lying to you. And I'd stay stay clear from them. But we live in an environment now coming off post-2008 economic Armageddon, really. And most intelligent people know that the fiscal system here in the United States is structurally finished. It's broken, but they're not allowing it to crash. They're not allowing it. And I saw a video and a piece you did on this. They're preventing the catalyst from occurring that I believe would actually rally support, more support around a legitimate movement. Instead, they're indoctrinating the masses through group psychology. They're moving the masses through fear. And they're moving the masses through shock and awe type events, whether or not this is the United States gearing up for war in Syria, arming terrorists and arming Al-Qaeda, and selling the idea that it's somehow, some kind of humanitarian issue, when the United States is actually the one moving guns and weapons of war out of Libya, and recently murdered Muammar Gaddafi's government into Syria, helping to propel the civil wars and the chaos that we're seeing. How do we create enough steam to provide a reasonable catalyst for the change I think a lot of us talk about, which is just common sense change? I mean, ridding those people that are evil and that are just hurting us. Bottom line, hurting the American people, hurting people around the world. This is global. This is not just U.S. Pacific. Is there a catalyst that can help propel that movement outside total financial Armageddon, which it appears, if we're paying attention to what's happening at the Federal Reserve and the policies of people like Ben Bernanke, they're going to print this thing into infinity, and they're going to lube it up so they can push this thing out another 5, 10, 15, who knows, 20 years longer. What's your take on that, and what do you think happens next?
Well, I don't think they're going to let it go 20 years or even 10 years. It looks to me the timetable is much shorter than that. I see the kind of events that they're pushing through in the past year. I mean, 2013 has just been a series of events that normally would have been spread out over a decade. And that to me tells me that they're running behind and they see what's happening. I mean, there's the awakening on our end has been exponential. I mean, if you just look at the figures this year, internet media is going to pass TV viewership. Mm-hmm. We're about to pass them. That's a groundbreaking landmark. And to them, they recognize that this means they're losing control of the dialogue. They're losing the ability to control the narrative. And it doesn't matter how many guns you have. If you don't control the narrative, you lose in the end. If you can't control the mind of the person behind the trigger, you don't control anything. And so I look at it right now as they see how fast this awakening is happening. And I know for some people, you look out the average person on the street and you think, oh my gosh, what was he talking about? I mean, these guys are just completely asleep. Well, yeah, I mean, if you only have, say, 15% of the population, which I would say it's probably about that or a little bit more, because you remember that recent poll, 29% of Americans believe that an armed revolution may be necessary in order to preserve our freedoms in the next few years. Well, that says something. It may not mean that 15% or 30% of the population is awake, like they really, really understand something, but it's on the tip of their mind. They feel it. There's something wrong, right? So that means that we're crossing a threshold. We're reaching that critical mass, and as you get closer, it becomes more and more visible. I mean, I can see the difference just now in comparison to all the different, I mean, in the previous years that I've been involved in this. It doesn't necessarily show in the street right away because you're still outnumbered. But when you have that critical mass of 15, 20% who are pushing or trying to wake people up, eventually that crowd will win out against the majority because the rest of the people, they're not really leaders. They're followers. They take impulses from those around them. And so it's very much like, if you were to think of it like in a brain, you have neural connections. And I would say the average person is just like a passive receiver. They're used to just having the information come in and repeating what comes out. Well, when you have people like us who are out there spreading a new kind of information, what we're essentially doing is we're forcing them to reevaluate the kind of information that they're passing on. And the thing is, the average person is a conformist. We know this.
Mm-hmm.
It works both ways. It cuts both ways. It can be a really, 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 really bad thing when everybody's conforming to a totalitarian system, obviously. But at the same time, those same people, when they see everyone around them waking up, they go along with it. You see what I mean? And this is what I believe is necessary, is to start breaking that silence. Because there's a lot of people who are awake, and they're near people who are awake, but they don't know it because they're being silent. There was a study called the Ash Conformity Experiments, and I'm sure you've heard of it. I'm not sure that everybody in your audience has heard of it, but if you haven't heard about it, go research it. But basically, it was a guy, Solomon Asch, who wanted to understand why people conformed to Hitler and why totalitarian leaders are able to take control of crowds. And what he did is he set up an experiment where he told the people who were involved that it was going to be an eye experiment, a vision experiment. Mm-hmm. But in reality, everybody except one person, the true subject, were actors. And basically, they brought him in there, and the actual subject answered last when they asked him a series of questions. And what they did is, in the beginning, the actors would say the right answer for a really obvious question, and after 3 times, they would start saying the wrong answer. And the test was to see if the person who was the real person would conform to everyone around them if everybody was saying the wrong thing. And it turns out that the majority of the people would conform some of the time. 75% would conform some of the time, and about 47% would conform all of the time, which is huge. They would say something that was radically wrong was true because everyone else around them was doing it. And later, another scientist did studies that showed that this shift in perception wasn't just happening on a conscious, like, giving in to the group level, but was actually happening on a neural level, that the person was actually perceiving the wrong thing based on what the group was perceiving, which is very scary.
Yeah, very, very scary. So, I mean, really what needs to happen is we need to empower leaders to make it safer for the majority or a good portion of the population to, move towards that path.
What he discovered is that if just one person, if just one of the actors said, I disagree, then that was enough to snap them out of their spell. And they were actually able to see it correctly at that point. For the vast majority of the people, if just one person stood up, it would snap them out of their conformity. And that, to me, was the takeaway lesson, is that we're basically surrounded by a bunch of people who are watching the emperor walk by completely butt naked, and everybody's going, "Ooh, such nice clothes he's wearing, such nice clothes." And what we need to be is that little audacious kid who just has the guts to say, "But the emperor's not wearing any clothes. He's naked." And that snaps people out of it. I mean, that was the moral of that story. That was what he was trying to get across.
I don't know if I want to see Hillary Clinton naked or anyone else in Washington. Even though people like Anthony Weiner, I mean, they try to get it out regularly and tweet it out. So, these are heavy topics, and in the way that I think a lot of us are seeing this unfold, which is amazing to me because the narrative being propelled by the mainstream media and Washington is so predictable. That's what I find really kind of crazy most of the time, especially if you're tapped in to the news wires and what's being pitched through the mainstream media, what's coming out of the mouth of the president, through the teleprompter readers, etc. The only way that personally, just in my opinion, that I can see Washington justify the leaks that came from whistleblower Edward Snowden and justify the surveillance state itself, which has been built around all of us by a naked emperor, is by cultivating more fear type events, cultivating other type of, whether you want to call them false flag terror attacks or staged attacks, or it could be the introduction of a new war. It could be engagement of Syria. It could be engagement of Iran, the path to Persia. Is that what you see? I mean, do you see that the government needs a smokescreen now in a post-Edward Snowden NSA leak world where we already knew this stuff was happening if you're informed, but now it's been confirmed. It's been confirmed and you can't ignore it. Amazing journalists like Greenwald, help break this story to the world. How do you think the establishment negotiates these revelations in terms of manipulating group psychology and the masses themselves?
Well, I mean, obviously, when they don't have... Actually, I'm going to take a step back, because really what it comes down to is controlling the people's sense of unity and separation. Like, who is us and who is not us? I mean, there's certain times... And the reason I make this distinction is because there's certain times when they actually want us to be divided. And in fact, it's the majority of the time. They want to keep us completely ineffective, so they create these group identities, the left and the right, the conservatives and liberals, and they pit them against each other, and they create these dialogues to make each other annoying and keep people fighting. So that's one element of control. The other element is to selectively unify people at given times, but in the way that they want them to be unified, towards a purpose that they want them to be pointed towards. And the way that you do that is by a common threat. I mean, it's pretty primitive, but that's how humans are wired. Even if you've been fighting with your brothers and sisters, if a burglar breaks in, you all join together and you kick his butt, right? It's the same principle, just on a higher level, based on our group identity as a nation. And this is one of the things they try to really be in control of, is to what degree and when we will unify and for what purpose. So they want us to unify when they want us to unify, for only as long as they want us to unify, and then they want us to disperse back into our left-right paradigm. This is how they operate. So the way that they do that, either they allow an attack to happen or they actually do it themselves, and then they create a narrative, a description of the story. This is what happened, this is why it happened, and this is what we've got to do, the problem, reaction, solution. And we really can't stop them from creating a problem, because these guys have resources that we can't even come close to matching. I mean, they've got the CIA, the NSA, they've got U.S. military, overwhelming. Mm-hmm. But we can influence the reaction. And I think that's where we need to be focused, is being in a position so that they can't control the narrative. And I really recently just posted this on my Facebook page today. There was a really interesting article that that DARPA is investing money into learning how to control the narrative better, because they're realizing that they're not doing it very well. So, like the last several false flag events that have happened over the past year, it's just fallen apart. It just hasn't gotten them the results that they wanted, and I think that's kind of led them to be more sloppy and to make more rapid decisions. I think they're going to have to up the ante, to be honest. I think that in order to really, really, really shock the nation to its core and unify them, they're going to have to do something along the lines of a nuclear attack on U.S. soil. I really hope they don't do something like that, but they're perfectly capable of doing something like that. I mean, they're perfectly capable of killing millions of people for lies. We know this based on history. They've done it over and over and over and over again. So never underestimate their capacity for evil.
Yeah, and that's very scary, and it's certainly a possibility, whether or not people want to believe it or not. We had the power go out in our office a few days ago, and I mean it was pretty amazing, because it just kind of it shakes you down to the basic level and just kind of reminds you, it doesn't have to be a nuclear bomb. We don't need an American city even wiped out. They just knock us off the grid. There's no electricity. Let's say that occurred for more than a few months, 6 months, a year. There would be total chaos. Without our ability to communicate, to have monetary transactions, for people to use debit, credit cards, The financial markets are obviously all geared around this. It would be a total, completely catastrophic type event that would very easily galvanize the people and rally the people around any objective, regardless and how crazy and outlandish it might be in that type of fear scenario. And we all know who the boogeyman is. We know who the crafted boogeyman is today. And that is, I always get a kick out of it, with Team America. Team America, I remember when that movie came out, and I was crying, literally just laughing so hard, just with the timing of it and how true it all is. The boogeyman is Islamic terrorists. It's the threat of Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. It's a known fact. He's on the CIA's payroll. This is all admitted. Hillary Clinton, I saw you put a video out, really great clip of her talking about the fact that, we've been funding, and we were funding Al-Qaeda. It really is, pretty amazing. So in your opinion, Islamic terrorists, how overstated is that? Is it a threat? Is it a real threat? What's your take?
Well, it's definitely not a threat against the United States. I mean, the United States is the most powerful military in the world. There is not a single nation on the earth that could face them in combat and win. So why are we scared about these disorganized non-nation groups that have, at the most, little handheld rocket launchers and AK-47s? They don't pose any threat. It's about building up this boogeyman status so that they can go into the countries that they want, and the countries that they want to go into just happen to be Arab, so it's convenient to make the boogeyman be Arab so that you can have that justification. But, really, if you look at the amount of damage, and you look at the security that they have already in place, right? How many waves of Al-Qaeda extremists are going to come right in and just devastate America? Americans are the most armed country on the face of the earth. Not just the government, the population. So it just doesn't make any sense to me that people would be even close to scared about this. To me, it shows something's not right. Why would you be scared? You have less of a chance of dying from Islamic terrorism than from bee stings. Seriously, it's literally that. So, yeah, let's create this big campaign about the imminent threat of a bee sting campaign. Really, you're literally more likely to die from that. So why not? Let's build up the dangers of drunk drivers and set up TSA checkpoints to catch all the drunk drivers. And they literally do that in some places now. You have like these checkpoints that they were doing in Austin. I remember last time I was there, where they were literally forcing people to take blood. It's all this, and this is where the problem comes down, is people have been conditioned to seek safety over freedom. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's like, well, seriously, if there is no such thing as safety in life, you're gonna die. Period. It's just gonna happen. It's gonna happen. You're gonna die. So the question is, how are you gonna live? Are you gonna live in a cage, or are you gonna live free? Are you gonna take some risk, or are you gonna live in a padded room on medication?
Yeah, that's where many Americans, quite frankly, choose the latter. And the other thing that ties into that, what do you stand for, as a human being? And I think it's important, to stand for something. None of us, are perfect, and everybody's human. I was watching the president on Jay Leno. I actually saw the rebroadcast and some clips of it, and he actually did even mention that. It's interesting to see how even he's trying to control the narrative. Made statements saying that, the NSA isn't spying on everybody. Only if they think you're a suspected terrorist, which I don't know how they define that. I guess it's just every American that might fall under the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. And he did say something specifically about that you're more likely to, he didn't use bees as an example, but he said something to the effect that it's not likely, to be struck by, a terrorist attack, randomly. You're more likely to be struck by a bolt of lightning. Or something like that out on the golf course. So I see how they are trying to fight to control this narrative. And, the positive thing is they're losing. They're actually losing the fight. I've seen reports, you've mentioned too, where it's changing. We're now, alternative media, websites like StormCloudsGathering, your program, your show, your videos. I've seen reports that say they are already getting more traction than the typical news media and those typical avenues. So the whole paradigm has been turned on its head. Now there's a lot more people able to influence public opinion and get the truth out to the masses. I wanted to ask you specifically, Edward Snowden. What's your take on him? Is he a legitimate leaker? Is there a possibility that somehow he's connected into the underworld of the CIA, either working with the U.S. government, a double agent or something like that, maybe working for Russia? What was your gut reaction? What is your gut reaction to Edward Snowden specifically?
See, that one's a tricky one because on one hand, it's galvanized the public in a way that I don't think that they planned for it to. I think that they were hoping that they would get the public, either against Snowden or scared, but the reaction was the opposite. People were enraged and they were standing up for him and they were putting his profile image on their profile image for Facebook and places like that. So on one hand, I don't want to just really slap those guys in the face who really think of them as their hero, because I know there's a lot of them out there. At the same time, I look at the story and it just doesn't add up completely. I mean, there's way too many opportunities the United States had to take him down, and they didn't. I mean, it's not. We're talking about the CIA here. I mean, he's going to be hiding in the Russian airport, hiding in Hong Kong, and they're not going to be able to find him. This is the NSA we're talking about, the CIA. These are the most powerful organizations on the face of the earth, and he's just using communications left and right, and he's able to use his credit card or whatever he's using to pay for this stuff.
Yeah.
And no problem? Come on, I don't believe it. Yeah. I don't know what the real narrative is, but to me, that sets off some flags. And I looked at some of the stuff in his story, and it just doesn't make sense either. Like his background, how he got to the position he got to, how he got access to the information. I mean, it's almost like it's just somebody just shoveled it in front of him. I mean, who gives that kind of information to an outsider like that?
Yeah, and at the very least, there's holes in the story. Part of me also thinks, does it even matter? Because it seems to have backfired. Regardless, it's gotten out the truth out to the American people and the people of the world that, look, this is a reality. You're being surveilled. You live in a prism with an M. You also live in what I would say a prison technologically. This is what they've built all around us, is a medium of control. But there are holes to the story. I mean, I got chuckles out of it too, just talking with friends and family. I mean, here he is. He's boarded up in the Sheremetyevo Russian airport for, was it a few weeks or something like that? I mean, he had to, there he is boarded up. There's supposedly journalists from all over the world. They can't even get a photo of him. I mean, just basic questions. I mean, where's this guy eating? How is he sleeping? How is he going to the bathroom? So there's certainly holes to the narrative itself. I mean, just being a critical thinker, somebody looking at it. But you know what? Maybe it doesn't matter, because maybe it's done its job. It has been, however, incredibly damning information. Damning towards the United States, which kind of puts me on the side of things. Well, maybe the likelihood more leans to double agent of some kind working for a foreign government. There's no real way to know 100%. For sure, but it is certainly impacting politics and just casual conversations at the dinner table with friends and family. What are your thoughts on there's been a lot of conspiracy deaths recently. People like Michael Hastings, journalists on the major stories, reaching out to WikiLeaks a day before he was killed, sending out emails en masse to friends and family. One of them was Sergeant Biggs, who he met in Afghanistan, saying, I'm on to the biggest story of my life. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. I got to go off the grid. Here's a guy that broke major headlines on Rolling Stone, brought down General McChrystal, who was replaced by Petraeus. Petraeus also embroiled in scandal. We've had Barnaby Jack, technological wizard, famous 2 years ago for demonstrating at the Las Vegas tech convention how he was able to spit money out of ATM machines with a couple keystrokes. He was about to show a few weeks ago how he could kill you, literally, by hacking into pacemakers that have been implanted into millions of Americans and millions of people around the world and literally make your heart explode. He was going to show you an example how he could deliver a massive dose of insulin from an insulin pump, and so basically that would be injected into your pancreas and kill you. Show these incredible vulnerabilities. We have people like Chris Kyle. It goes all the way back to the Boston bombing. You did so many great reports on that in your archive. What are your thoughts? I mean, I know that it's conspiracy, quote unquote, but they thought people were whack jobs, back, in the Vietnam era. If you said that Gulf of Tonkin was a false flag terror attack, you were a tinfoil hat wearing lunatic that people laughed at. Now we know it's a fact. That was bullshit. It was a lie. We know of other false flag stage terror attempts like Operation Northwoods, etc. So I mean, what's your opinion? I mean, is this the NDAA in action now? Because we know President Obama passed this thing, by bypassing Congress. The people didn't vote for this thing or put it in. We know he passed it for a reason. So are they on an active campaign now, just whacking Americans they deem a threat?
Well, I think that ties into the Snowden thing, because I think a lot of these things are just about intimidation. And really, what it comes down to is if they're not able to control the dialogue because there are people who are speaking out. And inherently, there's always people who speak out louder or more accurately or with more effectiveness than others. Those are essentially the leaders, the people who are able to get the information out there to the public and succeed. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to make an example of people, saying if you're going to leak information, we're going to make you disappear forever. Like the Bradley Manning case. I mean, what he did, that the whole story is also full of questions. But in the end, if you look at it, what is the end message? If you give away any information that the U.S. government doesn't want to be given out, we're going to put you in a hole forever. We're going to make you disappear, or we'll kill you, literally. I mean, the case with Hastings. I mean, it just came out recently that he was the target of his next investigation was the CIA director John Brennan. Well, that tells you something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, this is a guy who runs the drone program who is obviously comfortable with killing people. So to assume that these people would kill people in foreign countries and would just avoid killing people in this country if their particular reputation or their programs are at stake, that's naive. Of course they're willing to kill Americans. But the main issue isn't just to knock out all of the activists. And really what they're hoping for, what they're trying to get is fear. They're trying to get the chilling effect when people go, I don't want to be next. I don't want to be that guy that gets knocked off next.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot let them succeed in this. And I know it's scary when you're faced with a government that's this out of control. I fully understand it. I feel that. I feel that. Trust me. I feel that. I'm out there, and I know that they can kill me. They could. But the reality is, you have to imagine, look ahead, another 10 years, what happens if everybody gets silent and they actually are able to control everything 100%? And then you got something far scarier, where if you so much as whisper against the government, there's people at your door. They know exactly what you said, and they disappear you right there. Yeah. That's the kind of system you're headed for if you don't stand up now.
Yeah, and that's a very, very dangerous path to head down. And you look at it, and I know the example. A lot of people, they kind of yell at me that example's so tired. But you look at Hitler and you look at the rise of Nazi Germany. How many people didn't speak out and just conformed and went along with the narrative, which brings up another challenge, I think, regarding this awakening, in this movement for real enlightenment and positive change, for humanity, which has been, ushered in. This has been one of the great things of technology, and we've seen this, how this has transpired over the past few years, Aaron. But we got a problem here too, and the problem is we have a monopoly of control at the top regarding the technology that we're using to fight against the establishment and to fight against the machine. We have companies that dominate that presence. So is that not a problem? Is that not a challenge when, quite frankly, you, me, could be turned off a click of a switch if they wanted to. They can turn off independent thinking if they want to. They can shut down the voices of millions of Americans if they want to, people around the world, overnight. They have that power. They have that control. And it sounds to me that the people need to build their own infrastructure, their own communication system, which means we need some of the most brightest, brilliant minds in technology and in the business world. And it also needs realistic tools like capital and funding to truly build a legitimate legitimate communication network based on truth, based on differing opinions, and all the values things that we value here in the United States. People have shed blood for our First and Second Amendments. The Second Amendment protecting the First, our right to free speech, our right, if you want to, you can burn an American flag if you want to. You might not agree with it, but you can do it. You can choose to worship a god or not a god. You can, become a part of any religion or not a religion if you want to. Do you see that also as a challenge? The fact that there is a single pipeline controlling all of this information. We have a hive, and they're all connected to it. And it's all controlled by the same entity, whether or not it's Google or YouTube or Facebook or one of these companies. How do we get around that mechanism of groupthink, group psychology, and control of the masses themselves?
Well, that is a big challenge because it takes a lot of infrastructure to be able to compete with them on just in terms of the speed of video and being able to comment and all of these things and to be able to manage. And servers that can handle even a fraction of what they can handle are very expensive, and the development to get to that point is extremely expensive. And, a lot of people have been working on their versions, and I think a mistake that a lot of people make is they say, we've made a liberty-oriented Facebook, because I've heard like 3 guys who did that at least. And I look at it, like actually the Tea Party did. They did a Tea Party Facebook, and it looks literally just like Facebook. And I go, well, that's kind of a problem because it's too much like Facebook. It actually needs to innovate in some other ways, some significant ways, in order to really succeed, because really what you need is something that comes in and revolutionizes the market, because you're still competing in the market with these other platforms which have massive amounts of money behind them. So the edge that you've got to have is methods of communication that actually give people what they want. Problem is, like for instance, you look at these things like Facebook pages. They recently, or actually not recently, a year ago, they reduced the actual number of people who see your post down to 15% of your total followers on any given post. It may not be the same 15% in each post. Like say you post once and say one section of people see it, and then you post another time, another section of people see it. They give you the option, if you pay a huge chunk of money, like now on my page, it's up to $600 if I want to promote a post. And if I promote it, then it would get to all the people who liked the page. I'm not going to do that. I can't afford to do that. Yeah. I mean,
so they're putting barriers up too. I mean, now they're putting up barriers and entry in an environment that is, in a lot of respects, kind of been the Wild West, which it's been awesome because again, you've had every voice now can be heard if it wants to be heard, but that's changing too. And that I think is, an active battle, a lot of us are fighting, in terms of what's coming next. We see how the fear propaganda is at work. We see how how the mainstream media is treating the leaks and whistleblowers like Edward Snowden and the inhumane treatment of people like Bradley Manning. Don't be Bradley Manning. Don't use second-grade intelligence and tell the American government or tell WikiLeaks when you see something's wrong. You'll go to solitary confinement for life, and if they don't do that, maybe they'll kill you. War is also a very a very big topic of discussion, something a lot of us see on the horizon. What do you think is the end goal? I mean, we look at Syria. We look at how the United States has actively been engaging in a destabilization effort in the Middle East for years. They've brought down Libya. They've helped to kill Muammar Gaddafi, one of the most wealthy people on the planet, by the way. I'm sure it had nothing to do with that, but just happened to be one of the wealthiest. I think he was like in the top 5 on the planet, something crazy like that. Now we're in Syria. They're actively engaged in funding and arming the insurgents. Why are we there? Is it the U.S. dollar and protecting the reserve currency? Is there another reason? Are there a few reasons? What are your thoughts?
Well, the thing is that the dollar, even the powers that be, like Zbigniew Brzezinski, they understand that the dollar is on a limited time frame. In fact, they know that it's going to end. They know that the United States has a limited amount of time to influence events. So if you read Zbigniew Brzezinski's book, The Grand Chessboard, he actually talks about what America's job is to do for that period between 1997 when he wrote it until the United States falls. Because he said the United States was going to be the last superpower, and then it was going to be replaced by a global system, global government. And that's not just some guy who's talking off the top of his head. This is not a conspiracy theorist. This is a guy who has been behind one of the big movers and shakers behind foreign policy for the last 30 years. And he was actually one of the guy who actually tricked Russia into invading Afghanistan. He was behind funding Osama bin Laden in building up the Taliban. That was all part of his strategy, and he actually has publicly admitted that. So when a guy like that speaks, you've got to take it seriously. And to me, it all matches. I look at what the Council on Foreign Relations calls for, and Zbigniew Brzezinski is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and Dick Cheney was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, Hillary Clinton's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the current Secretary of Defense. We have a lot of these people. I can't remember every single person's name at every single time, but at least since Nixon, most of the key positions in terms of Secretary of State have been held by people within the Council on Foreign Relations. For instance, Colin Powell, he was Council on Foreign Relations. And so you can, if you understand who's in these positions, you can go to their website and look at what they're pushing. They're pushing towards this. They're pushing towards global governance. They have a whole section on their website about global government. And it was through them that I was able to find out about the fact that they were trying to set up a unified security perimeter from Canada, the United States, and Mexico. They were talking about this back in 2005, and you can actually still download the document from their website. It's Security and Prosperity Agreement. I can't remember exactly what the name of the document is, but this is the kind of thing that they're promoting. It's all about incrementally getting the framework in place, and that's how Zbigniew Brzezinski presented it. Is that the United States' job was essentially to put the infrastructure of global government into place, so that when it falls, it'll just be taken over by a global government. So essentially, we're the attack dog. We're being used. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you talk a lot about the left-right paradigm. And of course, we have an election coming in 2016. I know a lot of Americans are excited for Billary 2016, Hillary Clinton, who unfortunately I think is a shoo-in. I mean, she's already, I'm sure, she's already measured the drapes before, because this is just a lineage and family tree of royalty that just keep taking the White House and fulfilling the New World Order agenda. We also have others, people like Rand Paul. A lot of people believe he's filling the void, from the libertarian, Republican, conservative base. He's going to, challenge Hillary in 2016. How is this? And I know where you're going to head with this, Aaron, but this is all bullshit, right? Because nothing's going to change. And as we saw the last election and the election before that, this is a broken system, broken paradigm. Will we even have an election in 2016, or could we maybe potentially even have a flashpoint of real change before then? Your thoughts?
I've consistently said that I would be really surprised if we made it to 2016. But I mean, I don't know. The time keeps going by. I mean, we're at 13, so we got 3 more years. It could happen. Who knows? I mean, the fact that they're getting Rand Paul all groomed for it, and they're gonna attempt to see if they can get it to fly, but I don't think it's gonna work because it's not really. He's made too many errors exposing what he really stands for in the early stages. He's really a neocon, and so I mean, yeah, he might try and he might fool a few people, but there's gonna be people like me I'm gonna be speaking out against him. I'm already started speaking out against him. Because the worst thing that can happen, far worse than having some kind of crook like Hillary in place, which she's definitely a crook, is a crook that everybody thinks is a saint. Mm-hmm. Especially a saint who's a liberty-oriented saint. I mean, Barack Obama for the libertarian movement, a libertarian-flavored Barack Obama, that to me is far more scary. I mean, because then you suddenly have our audience, the people who we've been working on, suddenly they're the ones who are drinking the Kool-Aid. That's not good. I really don't want them to get sucked into that. I mean, it's one thing if they just pull it like a sham election and people are like, yeah, whatever. That would be the best case result. This is to the point where people are just completely not voting. You're down to like 2% voter participation. Everybody views it as a fraud, and internationally it loses legitimacy. Because that's the thing. Low voter turnout is internationally viewed as a sign that there's no faith in the system. So that's a vote that I would be placing right there. Mm-hmm. A vote of no confidence. I have no faith in the system or in the legitimacy of these elections. Therefore, I do not participate. And if people do that, and not just passively, but actually outspokenly telling the people around them, listen, guys, the system is a sham. Do not legitimize it. Because if you sign your name and say, I vote for this person, you're essentially saying that I believe that the system is legitimate and that there's actually a chance of getting the result that I want. Well, then you're just it's essentially signing a contract saying, I grant you authority to rule over me. I mean, if you say, I want this guy to be president, then you're saying, I want you to rule over me. Because that's what the president is right now. He's a monarch. He has all the powers of a monarch. He can kill you at will. He can take your property at will. He can do anything he wants. So you're just choosing your monarch between two hand-picked puppets.
Yeah, and what's amazing though, it appears most Americans are okay with that. I mean, quite frankly, like, he's never going to use the NDAA. I mean, when we first started talking about this, people didn't even believe me. I would talk to friends and acquaintances, and I would tell them about, have you heard about the National Defense Authorization Act? Here it is. This is what it means. It can actively kill you at will. First, they didn't believe it. Then when it became a reality and became more a part of our culture, and people understood it as a real thing and a real document as well, he's not going to exercise that power. I have nothing to worry about it. It's almost to me, a good portion of the time, I don't think people want to know the truth. I don't think a good portion of people want to understand how dark this gets and understand the mechanisms of control that are in place in order to maintain a society, let's face facts, that is ripping apart at the seams, literally as we broadcast this to our audience. We've got a few minutes left, Aaron. It's been a pleasure having you on. Again, if you haven't tuned in yet, please do. StormCloudsGathering on YouTube. Subscribe to his channel. Visit his website, StormCloudsGathering.com. I know everybody wants to know, Aaron, what are you working on next? Do you have any special projects, that you're working on? Maybe an upcoming video. You can kind of tease us what's coming down the pike.
Well, I'm actually working right now on part 2 of The Revolution as an Instruction Manual, and the thing is about this, there's a bigger project that I've been working on for a long time, and it's a full-length documentary. And what's happened is some of the information that I've found in my research I've viewed as too important to wait until I could get the whole flashy big picture things done. So I've kind of cannibalized the documentary piece by piece. Revolution and Instruction Manual was one of those cannibalizations. So that was actually the final section, actually not the final one, it was the part 4 of 5 of the documentary that I redid and reformatted to make it shorter. So this has actually been useful because what it's been doing is allowing me to preview how people are going to react to things and what parts are missing. So essentially, this Revolution Instruction Manual is turning into a series, and it's kind of developing in a different order than I thought it was going to. But it does segue into the documentary, and in the end, I think what's going to happen is it's going to be unified with the documentary. I might go back and make Revolution Instruction Manual in HD and kind of and adapt it and unify it with part 2 and whatever other parts come after that, and string it along into a proper order. And that's the trick is to get this massive amount of information, because the information that I compiled for the documentary was over 2 hours. It was like 2 hours and 20 minutes long, and even then I felt like I was not doing the individual topics justice, because there's so much. Once you actually start looking at it, like it started from World War I all the way to what I'm calling World War III, which is the situation that we're in right now. And, names and dates, going through this event, that event, and chaining it all together and showing who was involved. And once you actually see who was involved, you realize it's the same group of people. You find out who founded the Federal Reserve. Paul Warburg also helped found the Council on Foreign Relations. Walter Lippmann, who wrote the 14 Points document in that same committee that later became the Council on Foreign Relations. He wrote books that fundamentally influenced Edward Bernays. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit off track there, but basically trying to put the whole thing together.
It's kind of like going to the grocery store. You see all these options. You think that there's, hundreds of companies that are supplying all these products that you actually have a choice. It's actually like 3 companies that provide all of the options in the grocery store, and it's kind of like the same thing. Any action steps? If a listener was tuning in right now, or they pull this up in the archives, is there something specific that they could do almost immediately that you think would help, enlighten more people and move the movement, of truth forward?
Well, what I'm working on right now is getting people to self-organize in groups, and I've started 3 groups on Facebook that some of them are kind of an experimental stage, and one of them has a very definitive purpose, and it's that one is it's so clear and simple that it has guidelines established and the rules are enforced, and that's the activist exchange, which basically is designed strictly for exchanging literal activist ideas, not just showing links, the government's doing this, but hey, what about if we do this? And so getting people to exchange ideas like that and then meet up with each other. The concept is, if you're living in a specific area, form a group of people who are like-minded, and then send somebody to be kind of a liaison to communicate with the other groups. So you start building up these networks, like neural networks between the groups. I mean, it just makes sense. If you've got all these people who are radically different, which they are, I mean, you're not going to get liberals and conservatives to want to agree on every single detail. The smarter thing to do is to have the liberals form their own kind of little groups, the conservatives form their little groups, and then learn how to communicate with each other and to work together. And then that can translate later into a kind of federated relationship. Because that's what I believe I think the future needs to be, is independent groups that people who are living the way that they choose to as a group next to other people who live radically differently and voluntarily associating, having trade, mutual defense, these kinds of things. And I think we need to start building up that paradigm right now, just at the baby step level that we can, which may be just as simple as learning to communicate, because you try to watch the comment sections for videos, you see how people go at each other. They're just completely incapable of talking to each other. So and before you can even begin to talk about a revolution of any sort, you have to get to the point where you can learn to stop throwing out certain, trigger words, emotional time bombs that will turn everybody off, and learn how to communicate to the person based on where they are. And
I couldn't have said it any better myself. I mean, it's such a simple concept. And next time we have you on in the future, and I'd like to get into how that would work in practice, because you talk about what is it, a federation of states, and this is historically, is that the term of it that you've used in your video that I saw with revolution.
Well, there was the Iroquois Federation, which was the inspiration for the United States. And the United States, in its first iteration under the Articles of Confederation, didn't have a strong central government, perhaps more so than the Iroquois Federation. I don't know the details of the comparison at the fine-tuned level, but the Iroquois Federation, it was like the United States, except it had no federal government. The independent states would send representatives to come communicate together, and then they would go back to their representative regions, and they would work with the people to get the ideas that they discussed in place, but without having a federal government standing over them, forcing them. And so the idea is what we really need to be having is something similar, where we concentrate all power, sovereignty at the local level. And whether that's, you call it a state or not, it could be something much smaller. And I think actually in our current situation, a state the size of Texas, that's just not going to work. I mean, to get that many people unified under a single way of life, it's not going to happen. Because for one thing, I mean, you look at just Texas, it's got people who don't even speak the same language. Huge sections of the state are now really de facto Mexico. And if there's a collapse, regardless of what you think the United States is, those people are going to group together, and they're going to form whatever culture comes after 20, 30 years, and it's not going to be the same as the guy in Austin who grew up around hippies. So it's not going to be the same thing at all.
Yeah, a lot of different people and different. Yeah, so that's an interesting paradigm and something that I'd love to expand with you on in the future. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Again, StormCloudsGathering. Check him out on YouTube and his website. I'm Christopher Green. You've been tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television, August 13th, 2013. Hard hitting and in your face. We'll get this up and archive shortly. Stay tuned.